Hello, audience. Thank you for taking the time out today. In this video, we're going to be discussing self-development. Now, as characteristic with most of my videos, it'll be about 47% planned and 53% winged. So here we go. We're going to cover why should we self-develop, when should and can we self-develop, and also how. What are some good strategies for doing it? We'll also touch on some of my recommendations for books and authors who have influenced me and how I do business and how I go about life. And I'll even touch on what I'm personally doing now to grow myself. So if I had a cool video intro, is where it would be exactly. But since I don't, we'll jump into it. So why self-develop, right? That's a big question. Why does it matter to sharpen your saw? Why does it matter to grow hard skills or soft skills or people skills or your knowledge base? Well, doing it grows you as a person. So it takes you from where you are now, wherever this is, you get to define that to where you want to be. And that gap is where that self development comes into place. So oftentimes that gap is I need a license, or I need a skill, or I want to be able to do this, or bench press my weight, or whatever. There's tons of different goals out there, and self development fuels those. So, in the context of a restaurant leadership position, you self-develop because it influences your team and it grows your team. All the little things that can drive you crazy about your team, when you weed those behaviors and habits out of yourself, oftentimes by proxy, people will no longer be doing those in their day. So it influences the team overall. It also develops your personal brand and creates opportunities for yourself for promotion, positions, speaking engagements, or just cool opportunities to go and do really cool stuff. So, speaking to restaurant leaders in this video, when is the best time to self develop? Well, depends what kind of culture that you're in. My experience has been in the car ride to and from the restaurant. There's that maybe it's a 5 minute commute, maybe it's a 25-minute commute. Well, what are you doing during that time? So I know you're not texting and driving because you're mature, responsible, and should not be doing that. Well, are you listening to the radio? Are you being influenced by music that's out there? Is that music growing you, or is that radio influence growing you? Or could you be spending that 5 to 25 minutes listening to an audiobook or a podcast or on the phone with a coach and mentor, hands-free, Bluetooth, wireless, all that stuff as well? But utilize that time. So gear yourself up for your shift, and then as you're heading home or wherever you're going after that, gear yourself down from that shift. That way you can be at your peak when you're there, and there's some sort of separation between your work and your life balance. So car rides, great. Breaks, if you get breaks, if you work in a restaurant, you probably don't get breaks. You don't really get a break during lunch or dinner, but maybe in that 2 to 4 time slot, or maybe that 9 to 11 time slot. If there's a breakfast transition, maybe work around that. But you most likely have 20 or 30 minutes just to hang out by yourself. And you get to choose what you do with that time. And do you spend your time on social media, or do you spend your time putting something good into your brain and doing things that are going to grow your skill set? Funny thing here, like when you need it, that's a great time to self develop. I remember when I was in my restaurant position, I realized we didn't really have an HR plan. We didn't have a rule book, a playbook. It was very much just well, this feels good, so let's do this. Or it was a case by case basis for people, and it wasn't consistent. It wasn't scalable. Every manager and leader there had their own sort of HR rules that they played by based on what worked in the past with this person and what didn't, and how good of friends are we with this and whatnot. So I got on Amazon, started typing in just HR, and one of the first books that came up was HR for Dummies. So I bought it used, I think, for $2.15 or something crazy like that. And I paid the $1.50 for the expedited shipping, had it a couple days later, and then just started digging into it. So for that next month, I worked through HR for Dummies, which seems silly, but I pulled so much out of that book, and that helped create the handbook that I was able to create for that leadership team for that restaurant. So kind of silly, but whatever, it worked. So if it's a whatever for dummies book, great, use it. That's why they're there. Another story, when the restaurant I was operating within, was bulldozed and being rebuilt. we had this like 8-week period of nothing. We really couldn't do much to really earn an income, but we wanted to be able to continue to pay everyone. So we paid them for self-development. And so during that time, we did leadership-wide book studies. We would sit down and listen to an audio book or podcast or something, and then really discuss some of the keys and concepts that were in it. So I don't know if that forum is going to be a good template to follow, because if the restaurant's open while you're working, but that's something that we did and we found huge success in that. We even played games of chess just to demonstrate the power of planning ahead 2 or 3 steps and how that could change not only the game, but the shift, the trajectory of the restaurant or even your life. So kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do I self-develop or how do I recommend people self-develop? Well, interviews, talk to business leaders or someone who has made it to where you want to be, but you're not yet. So say you aspire to be a marketing director. Well, you're not going to learn to market by working in a restaurant. The best place to learn to market is by someone who markets for a living. So go take that person out for a $5 cup of coffee and spend 30 minutes there just learning about what they do, how it works, why they do it, and all those questions, and learn some of their stories and experiences. So I remember a book that I read where there was some sort of cab driver, but he worked in an area of town where there were just lots of wealthy people, and he would listen to their phone conversations about what stocks to trade or sell or whatever, like what investments to make, how to manage money, and he would listen to the wealthy people in the back seat, and then he would take that advice home and put that into his own life. And just because he followed what they did, then he became wealthy and financially independent. Kind of cool. He didn't even have to pay for coffee. They actually paid him. So consultants, they're another really great resource. So chances are, if you're in a restaurant industry, the umbrella over you cares about food cost, paper cost, cleaning supplies, appearance of the restaurant. So there's probably a consultant working for the headquarters or somewhere else in your organization who can help you mitigate loss with ketchup. We talked about that, or sauces, or beef, whatever. Pick up the phone, call a consultant, learn from them, learn what they have seen other restaurant leaders do in the past. Uh, let's see, books, podcast interviews. Yeah, we touched on all of those. And outside of doing all of that, the simplest thing that you can actually start doing today is when you're leaving a shift or leaving a situation, sit there for 30 seconds and ask yourself, what went well? What could have gone better? What was a complete train wreck? And how can I get better or closer to achieving my goals in the future? Do that little 30, 60-second debrief with yourself, and just you'd be surprised at some of the feedback that you're able to get from that. I actually have a sheet of paper that I use sometime before going into a meeting. What do I know about this person? How can I best relate to them? Objectively, what do I know? How do I feel about this person? And that moves on to section 2 of what does that person think about me, feel about me? What's the dynamic of our relationship? Am I the best person to have this conversation with that person? It's a great tool because it gets me in the right state of mind to where I can effectively have conversations with people and effectively do my job. Back when I was doing it, I'm a different career now, but that's a tool that I still use today. And I found a huge benefit in using it in the past. So as far as some of my recommendations, and these are mainly just the books that have had a formative influence on me personally, my family, how I treat my family, how I engage with my family, business, how I behave just out there in the world. So there's a book called The Traveler's Gift. So buy this, read it twice. It's an easy read. It's a good history book. It also gives you great lessons from people in history. Love it. This one's written by Andy Andrews. It was a world bestseller or something like that, but really good. There's another book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So that's a great people book. You talk about feelings and just how to relate to people, how to make people like you. And one of the things that comes to mind just as I'm sort of bumbling through this is use people's names, remember people's names. So Justin, how are you? It's been a long time. Chances are that person, if you've only met them once, has no idea what your name is. but you remembering and reciting and saying their name to them in that greeting is going to go a long way to make that person like and trust you. Another book, The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I keep this one on my bookshelf. This is like 75 chapters of just awesome. So little 2 or 3 page snippets of little success things that he's learned over his years of being in business that have formed his life. And I've gotten so much from this. So I haven't read the whole book yet, but I've read chapters in it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Another good recommendation would be almost anything from Jim Rohn, Jocko Willink, Dave Ramsey. They've all been people who have formed me and just how I interact with people. And they don't really work on the skills, they're more mindset and some of the people, the interactions. That's what those three are largely about. They let you develop your own skills to master your own profession, what that is. So what am I doing now? Well, audiobooks more than anything. So I spend a fair amount of time in the car. I just finished a book called The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. I'm also working my way through the Ultimate Jim Rohn Library, which is super cool. And I've finished a book recently called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. So definitely recommend that if you're in business for yourself and you are your own marketing department. In addition to that, I'm also going through this textbook to get a securities license so that I can better serve my clients in what I'm doing now. So I'm constantly sharpening my saw. And I found that whenever I do, I become better, not only in the workplace, but also how I engage with my friends, my family, and each bucket of life is positively influenced when I self-develop in one way. So there we go. That's a fun little snippet on self-development, why it's important to self-develop. I focused more on the mind. One thing I'm going to throw in there too is focus on the spiritual stuff too. Focus on the physical stuff. So Henry Cloud talks about being a whole person, not just one pillar, but you're multiple pillars. I think that's Henry Cloud. Like I said, 53% winged or whatever the percentage was. But focus on your whole self, not just one area. So I kind of equate that to a guy who goes to the gym every day and works his upper body, and he's a tank from the waist up, but legs, he's super scrawny and kind of walks around like this. So focus on your whole self. And when I say that, I'm more speaking to myself because I tend to focus on my knowledge base and leave out the people skills and then way overcompensate the next 6 months and focus on people interactions and sharpening my skills there, but then kind of fall behind in the knowledge base. So for me, it's a vicious cycle. Don't do that. But all that to say, self-develop, it's definitely worth it. And I think if you talk to any CEO or millionaire or successful business owner or someone who has made it out there, they're going to spend a good chunk of their time self-developing and surrounding themselves with successful people. So my next little video, I'm pulling a chapter or two out of the success principles to dig into that on a very high level, share some of how that specific chapter has influenced me and some of the cool things that have happened in my life because of it. And I hope to see you there. Bye.